Sure.
I think it's starting. Okay, so in this particular level 3, as a part of this particular capability building program, as part of the level 3, let me share the lesson plan, which you might be on know already saw, but still just to socialize, today being the first class. So in this class, basically, I am actually going to go through or actually walk through all the lines of the lesson plan. I will actually tell at a high level what are all the topics we got planned to cover. So predominantly today's class is like a reading the table contents of a book. Know the table of contents of a book. You are now getting introduced to the index of the book, and starting from the next class, we will be deep dive into each and every concept. Okay. So to begin the journey, I have formulated this particular level 3, taking into consideration for a senior leadership role. So predominantly when we are talking about a senior leadership role, it is not just about agile transformation, right? It is predominantly from a business transformation. So together with our agile transformation capability, we do need some kind of a capability from a business acumen perspective, and also from strategizing, planning, and how to interpret a balance sheet, all those things. So okay, even in this particular topic, I do have a topic called a balance sheet driven agile transformation as part of the level 3. So what I meant is that we will be taking a portfolio level balance sheet and then try to analyze what are all the different aspects of the balance sheet, and then come up with some possible strategies which is going to change the numbers in your balance sheet quarter after quarter. Okay, quarter on quarter.
Sure.
So yeah, so this is predominantly like, if my agile transformation is not creating a significant impact on the numbers in the balance sheet, then know what am I really doing in the landscape. So from that perspective, I have formulated some topics over here. Now let me go one by one. First thing is, first thing in this point number one, I will be introducing you to multiple agile contracts, okay, and know how to write an RFP versus how to write an agile contract. Fundamentally, the difference between an RFP and a contract is RFP is something which is going to come before the deal. First, you need to win the deal, right? So once you won the deal, then how do you really strategize and create a contracting model? So to quickly explain, I'm going to use this particular notepad as our running notes. Once the session is completed, both the recording and this particular notepad will be sent. And starting from next class, any other artifacts and the templates used will be sent soon after the class gets completed. Okay, this is the guideline what we actually follow. So in terms of the agile contracts, probably we will quickly look into on a high level what are all the different contracts we are having. Okay, fine. So let's start one by one. Upper limit contract, lift off contract, lift off contract, iterative contract. Then we have one more thing like fixed profit slash risk sharing contract. Then target price profit contract. Then most of the famous contract which is actually picking up in the market or the commonly used is the managed capacity contract, and followed by, like as we know, safe managed investment contract. So what is this contract? Which contract to use where? When actually we can go for an when actually we can go for an iterative contract? What are all the pros and cons? All the trade-off costs, those will be explained in the the actual class. This being the first class, I just want you to get introduced to the flow. So these are all the contracts. Now can you tell me what are the contracts you are comfortable with, or you have worked upon here? Any kind of suggestions or perspectives to share?
Yes. So, sir, I have used, we have fixed profit,
Hmm.
and managed capacity contracts, uh,
Okay.
and iterative contracts. So we have worked here.
Okay, so what is the validation point for iterative contracts, like in your landscape? Just trying to understand.
Validation point is, actually it is taken by the
Okay,
uh, project managers and sponsors. So I am not
sure, sure, got
fully
it.
knowing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we used to do is that post we do a PA demo, right? Based on the PA demo outcome, much of the companies will actually take the iterative contract, because for me, if I go by the sprint, possibly the time box is very less, and that cannot be a correct validation point. Whereas if I'm taking program incremented demo, it could be a combination work of a multiple team of teams, right? It is not one single team. You have team of teams within the program. So program incremented demo, also called a system demo, probably could be a very good validation point. So when I get into the topic, I will go through, one by one. Next thing, if you go to the next topic now, overview of capex and opex, and how do they fit into the purview of approving funds, all these things. See, now what had happened is, even if you take scaled agile framework, if you go to version 4 and all, they used to have capital expenditure and operational expenditure. But now what happened in the latest version, they have the concepts of lean budgets, right? So how are you going to dynamically fund it? And you have a lean budget concept together with the guardrails, right? So we will be trying to see in those concepts, okay, then what happened to my capital expenditure and operational expenditure, how it is actually inherently factored going forward. Now, any kind of thoughts you like to share on this lean budgets or capital expenditure and operational expenditure, or do you wanted me to explain it a bit, or how is that now?
Uh, yes, I would like you to explain it a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So capital expenditure is most likely a one-time investment, right? It is most likely a one-time investment in terms of, let's say, for example, I'm just giving a simple example. The building cost. Building cost is a huge cost, but then it is a one-time investment. Whereas operational expenditure is a recurrence expense, month after month, right? Maintenance charges, okay, all those things. So I'm not deliberately getting into the details of it for a couple of reasons. One reason, this is an introduction class, and the second reason, since this video is going to get posted on a social media platform, I just want to just to cover the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so in the actual class, I will actually explain you this in a detail. Okay, so now what are we trying to see is that, okay, so what are we trying to see is how to approve the agile funding mechanism. Like, okay, how does the fundings are getting approved, and what is the filter mechanism? Funding approval flow. Okay, is there any filter? If so, what really happens? Okay, something like that we are actually going to do. Now if you see the flow of the lesson plan, here we are talking about agile contract, followed by capital expenditure and operational expenditure, followed by the dynamic budgeting, also participatory budgeting. Now in terms of the dynamic budgeting, what really happens is, I will show you my own customized agile framework, and then we can actually go from there. This is my customized agile framework. Probably you can take a minute to look into it, please. I'll wait.
Okay, sure. Sure, sir. I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay, you guys see now what actually happens is that in the case of dynamic budgeting, you can do one more thing. We can learn we can learn in this manner. you can go to save, let's say, you can go to save and then take the portfolio layer, okay, and then try to know, see for example, here what happens is I have something called the strategic themes, which is going to connect my enterprise to the portfolio vision, and every portfolio will is actually bound to have a vision, because portfolios are the building blocks of my organization. So this strategic theme is something which is connecting the enterprise to the vision. Now what happens, along the very similar line of thought, instead of strategic themes, I have created a investment mix. So this investment mix combined with the strategy will be called as a investment themes. There they use something called strategic themes. Here I am using something called investment mix combined with the strategy. So there will be minor variations in between the conceptual frameworks and the actual frameworks which are getting implemented on the play field. So here what we do is that all this run and protect, this particular tech refresh, this particular development, these will be created as a drop down field in the Rally. Let's say I'm actually using a tool Rally. In the Rally, we will be creating these fields as a drop down entities, and each and every epic will be tagged to one or more investment themes. Typically epic will be tagged to only one single investment themes. Now what happened, this investment theme will be mapped to the portfolio KPIs using a concept called the EBCM, Enterprise Business Capability Model. So when I get into the topic, I will explain you in a detail. For now, you just get to know what are we going to learn in the forthcoming classes. Okay, is that okay? The flow of the class now.
Yes, yes, sure.
Okay, now let us take some quick notes here. 1 minute. So in the case of, see, dynamic budgeting is a concept. When it is implemented in SAFe, one of the example of dynamic budgeting when implemented in SAFe, it is called a participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting. Okay, if you see the diagram, it is written here, no, PB. This is called a participatory budgeting. Now what am I going to do is, here I will be doing some kind of an epic level validation. Epic level validation using a MVP, okay, and epic hypothesis template. Okay, so in the class, when we get into this particular topic, I will try to simulate the participatory budgeting. I will also give you the template of a epic hypothesis validation, and then we will see how to actually take it forward from there. Okay, fine. Now let us go to the next one. I will close all these things which is not needed for now. Okay. Okay, now if you go to the next one, I am talking more on becoming a change agent, what are the strategic approaches to implementing and managing the change, and also giving some industry proven change management models. Now, what makes you to think that change management model is so important here? Like any perspectives?
Yes. So basically, every organization, when they go through the change, they definitely capture the major change impacts through their impact analysis. But a model definitely helps them to organize the way that they are doing the impact
Correct.
analysis, and it also helps to build proper roadmap for implementing it, and uh, every type of transformation or a project, it can benefit from one certain model. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I will actually put my thought in this manner. If you take agile transformation, right, it has an agile part and it has a transformation part, right? So agile part will be taken care of principles and practices, agile manifesto, 12 principles of agile, multiple frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, Safe, less huge, DAD, Nexus, Spotify. So many frameworks are there in the market. But what about the transformation part? So transformation part can be done, generally speaking, in a much more profound and impactful manner only when we are thinking from the level of a organization change management aspect. So instead of jumping into change management just like that and then doing it in a haphazard manner, it is always better to take reference from the existing proven frameworks or models. So the moment you take some reference from an existing model, your credibility increases. The credibility of the model that you are building is actually increasing, and you can present it to your clients also and try to convince them in a much more manner. It's not actually on convincing, it will also make you in a higher pedestal to actually justify your thoughts. Okay, so here what I wanted to say is, whenever you are building a model, what you need to see is what are all the driving forces and what are all the restraining forces, right? When you are building, okay, when you are trying to do something, there will be some forces which is going to help you, and there will be some forces which is going to be against it. So what are all the driving forces and what are all the opposing forces, which is, so that the net impact is going to decide whether can I go from the present state, whether I can go from the present state to the desired state. Okay, so if I want to just quickly show you it, no, in a small pictorial manner, I'm sure that you understood what I'm trying to say, but just to quickly show it. Okay, so some change I need to do. It could be any change. Say for example, reduce cycle time by 10 percentage, because if I tell change, people will be blinking or thinking what is the change. No, I'm actually talking. Let's say one of the example is reduce cycle time by 10 percentage, sprint after sprint, or program increment after program increment, which is a part of my outcome based plan, OBP. Okay, these things I will cover later in the class. Now, what am I trying to say is, there will be some positive forces which is called driving forces, which is there in the ecosystem already, and these forces are helping me to go from the present state to the desired state. But unfortunately, due to whatever be the reason, you may have some restraining forces. These forces will ensure you that whatever change you are trying to do is not going to happen so soon. So how to know? So whenever you are conceptualizing an organization change management model, you need to do something called a strategic refactoring. Okay, let me just repeat it. Strategic refactoring. Okay, I am not talking about code level refactoring. I am talking about refactoring at a business workflow layer. So those concepts will be explained over here. Did I make myself understandable?
Yes, sir. Yes. So I'm curious about the strategic refactoring. If you can add some more detail or elaborate here.
It will be covered in the class anyway, but then if since you asked me, I'll just quickly show you that template. Something like this. You can quickly take a view. You can put the problem here and then you can do an impact assessment.
Sure, sure.
See, when I get into the class, I will be deep diving into all these sections. But since you asked me what is strategic refactoring, I'm just showing a template like this. So you put your problem, you do an impact analysis, come up with perspectives or solutions, measure it, and put some metrics for measurement and the success criteria here. So what am I talking about? I am talking about business workflow level optimization. So I will try to combine all these things in that particular class. Okay. So I'm just giving you some notes here. Strategic refactoring. See, why are we talking about all these things is, these are all important ingredients for you to do an outcome based plan. So when I am embarking on an agile transformation, if someone asks you, right, okay, you are actually doing this agile transformation for these teams for 15 months. Now, what are the outcomes you have? No, like what are the outcomes you have like basically achieved? Then you should be in a position to justify it, right? Right, so these things will
Yes.
be, yeah, so what is that outcome, how will you set an outcome, all these things are a contextual. So when I actually take the classes, I will go one by one. Now let us go to the fifth topic. What I have mentioned there is something called a platinum edge change roadmap. See, I I am introducing you to so many models and so many proven practices in terms of organization change management, so that it will become relatively easy for you to craft a plan for change management. Like, no, define the scope of the change management and be clear on whether it is at a team level or at a program level mapped to multiple product lines, or at a portfolio level mapped to one product group, because a product group could be a combination of multiple product lines. Once you define the scope of the change, then what are we going to do, such kind of a high level things. Okay, so can you tell, no, from your experience, so when someone asks you, okay, okay, come up with a change management template or organization change management change management roadmap, like how will you proceed? Any thoughts?
So I would first of all I would like to categorize the change into the different levels, as you told that what is the size of this change, and then uh, what are the changes to the people, to the processes, and to the, sorry for the
Yeah, yeah,
sorry
yeah,
for
yeah.
the background
Continue,
noise.
please. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then so basically the people, process, and the communications, whichever is going to change according uh, to the particular impact analysis that we have done. So I will categorize those changes, and then based on the particular timelines of those changes and the stakeholders, I will create milestones according to that, uh, according to those timelines. So these two things I will understand, and also I will understand who are the key stakeholders for each area. That is, for example, the people part of the change, who are the key stakeholders and the teams involved. Then in the process part, who are the owners uh, whom I need to contact, and then we need to have workshop about understanding the changes that we will do in different parts of the system. And then in the communication part, so how we will communicate this change to the whole group, whole program. uh, so that communication strategy will also be part of
Okay,
it.
okay. So what is that we will actually do is, when we actually get into the class in this, like, no, I will be explaining you the 10 steps to do this change. We have some 10 steps formulated on a very high level in terms of how will you create a create a change roadmap and then get it done. Okay. See, now the point is, if someone asks, okay, even from an interview perspective, if someone asks you, okay, can you explain on the change roadmap, or can you explain on the organization change management aspect, there will be a difference in the answer between a person who is just thinking at that time and trying to formulate some answer, and for a guy and for a person who has prepared on multiple organization change management models and then presenting the answer, right? Because your answer gives more credibility, and the moment your answer gives more credibility, your perception of you will be elevated to the next level, okay, to a better platform. So from that perspective, this change roadmap, organization change management aspects, all these are important even from an interview point of view. Okay, now let us go to the topic now. Okay. Okay, here next, the sixth one, what I'll do is I will walk you through one of the case study where, no, on how that organization strategy is connecting the enterprise vision to the portfolio. Because see, if you go by SAFe, let's take this SAFe. Everyone says this strategic team is connecting this enterprise to the portfolio vision. Can you give me an example? Yes, I can give an example right away. HCL mode 123 strategy. If you take this example, if you go here, you can understand. See, this HCL technologies I have taken just for example. Okay, we can pull out n number of examples, and this is an internet portal only. Okay, this is not any confidential detail. So it is an internet open website. So here, if you come here you can see. Okay, something called mode 123 strategy. It means what? This organization, as part of the digital transformation and the digital enterprise initiative, have already thought through the market rhythms, and they came up with a strategy saying mode 1, 2, 3. Okay, what it means is anything and everything which I'm going to approve the funding, it's going to be one among these three logical groups. It could be either a part of mode 2, mode 3, or a mode 1. But then, depending upon the portfolio priorities, depending upon the emerging trends in the market, depending upon the evolving needs of the market, the funding will be continuously changed. If the funding is not getting changed, it is not dynamic budgeting, no. So when I actually take the class, I will be giving you a case study, and then I will try to simulate the situation. Okay, like that particular case study, we will try to bring some participatory budgeting elements and all, and then we will see how to position it in mode 1, how much mode 2, and mode 3. So that is the thing of this particular thing. Okay, so mode 1 is on core services, mode 2 is on next generation services, and mode 3 is on platform. It's more on products and the platform. Okay.
Okay.
So any questions here? Can I continue, or you want to ask anything?
No, sir. We can
Okay,
continue.
fine. Next time, what I wanted to know, no, I wanted to touch upon this particular agile and the DevOps model. Okay, so before I explain you, what thoughts come to your mind in terms of agile and the DevOps? Like you see any combination of it, or like okay, so the question is, when you actually read that we are going to read and we are going to have a grip on the subject agile combined with the DevOps model in our forthcoming class, what thoughts come to your mind generally?
So, I feel that it is a very relevant strategy because majorly when we have agile transformation, we are making the teams produce the product increment within 2 weeks. But
Mm.
then it is the release cadence which is definitely which can be improved if we introduce the DevOps, and we use the DCI/CD,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
implementation, so that whatever we are producing in such small time, we can quickly integrate it into the production and return the value for the customer.
Correct. So what happens typically in a large scale agile model, in a large scale or a scalable model is, it actually goes like this. Your portfolio layer is typically value identifiers. Your program layer your program layer is predominantly value enablers, and your team layer is value creators. It means what? See, my team is only creating the value, but who says this piece of work is value? That value definition identification comes from the portfolio. So now, predominantly, to start a DevOps delivery pipeline, one of the best way to begin the journey is you start with the XP. You start with extreme programming practices, which is going to tell about the engineering practices. Because if I take my Scrum as a framework, okay, it is going to give only process centric. It's not going to talk about my engineering capabilities. That things comes from the XP: test driven development, acceptance test driven development, behavior driven development, feature driven development, domain driven design, all these things. Now, from one way, a glorified version of XP can be considered as a DevOps. But then one important point to note is DevOps is not just automation. It is culture, automation, lean flow, measurement, followed by recovery. So in the actual class, I will explain you okay, how to take it forward when I combine a methodology or a philosophy called agile in terms of the technical capabilities. Okay, and here we will also try to imbibe some of the software craftsmanship aspects. Okay, so what do you mean by software craftsmanship? You might have heard this word, right? Software craftsmanship. See here, go to Agile Coaching Competency Framework, right? Agile Coaching Competency Framework, and understand when you say Agile coaching, what are all the different competencies, right? So here it is written no technical mastery. This technical mastery is called as a software craftsmanship. Your CI/CD pipeline, your solid principles, building an enterprise level architecture, reference guidelines, anything and everything on the technical leadership. All these things will be covered here. So when we are touching about that subject, Agile plus DevOps model, we will see a unified Agile DevOps transformation model, and we will also touch upon an executable roadmap so as to handle large scale transformation. When I say large scale, somewhere around 2000 plus. Okay.
Sure.
Now let us go into the next one. Maybe you can go on mute. When you need it, you can unmute. Okay. So next thing, one next thing, no. 1 minute. Let me get into the topic. Okay. Now the topic says differences between fixed versus growth mindset. Okay. And we are also introducing you to Kaizen culture and complete agile transformation. Okay. Now the point here is this: when I say complete agile transformation, it is something like multiple building blocks of the organization, multiple departments of the organization are coming together to do an enterprise level transformation, also called as an organizational agility. If I want to show you the diagram, probably this could be taken as the diagram, one of the simple example. Just take a minute to look into it, and then we'll proceed. All right, can I proceed?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, so what happens here? See, I am creating a backlog. See, now the fundamental is like this. Instead of using Scrum and Kanban to just execute our products or projects, why don't we use Scrum and Kanban to do an agile transformation itself? The only difference is instead of calling our project team members to do a project level daily stand up call, we will call people from different departments. Couple of them from IT department, couple of them from finance department. Call people from you call, okay, it means you have representatives from each of the departments for whom we had already given some basic agile training, and these representatives should be enabled and empowered to make some decision changes. So call those people, create an enterprise level Kanban board, and start putting all the initiatives. Now here I am actually piling up all the initiatives. I will prioritize it and then pull it to the enterprise Kanban board, and also create an organization level impediment of backlog. So what am I doing here? I am taking Scrum and Kanban or the Agile framework itself to do an organization level Agile transformation, which I mean complete Agile transformation, right? Because I wanted my, see, okay, anyway, my IT team had started doing a kind of an agile transformation, but I wanted my finance team to do an agile. They can do agile only when they start speaking the vocabulary of a dynamic budgeting. HR team wanted to focus on the team level appraisals. So that is the thing. Some of the companies are also embarking on a journey of a project to product mindset. And I wanted my marketing and pre-sales team to understand minimum viable product, minimum marketable feature, minimum marketable release, minimum marketable product. I'm just giving the full form for all these things. And then I also wanted my IT and support and DevOps team to understand culture, automation, lean flow, measurement, and recovery. So unless and until I have all the departments who are the building blocks of my organization participating in this transformation, we cannot do an enterprise level transformation. Okay, even in the YouTube, I have created one video pertaining to this, wherein no, I'm just giving an analogy. For example, if your family need to be happy, all the members in the home should contribute to the peace of the home. Even if one person is not contributing to the peace of the home, the entire family gets disturbed. So is the case because your enterprise is a system, right? I cannot do a systemic level transformation only with a small pillar called the IT department. Any thoughts from your end?
Yes, sir, I completely agree with you.
Okay, now this is a concept. In the mentoring session, I will tell you exactly step by step how I have done. See, I cannot teach you how actually you should do. I will share my experience in the mentorship class saying that this was the situation, this was the context, how I started the journey, what are all the impediments which came, and how did I overcome the impediments, and what are all the benefits. Everyone can give their own experience only, but from that experience you can leverage it, and probably you can accelerate your learning curve. Okay, fine. Now let us keep rolling the ball 1 minute. Okay, so we touched upon that Kaizen culture. Okay, so this is more on the continuous improvement culture, followed by the CAT. So CAT is something which I actually explained you now. Then let us go to the next topic. Here, if you see how to balance between system of delivery, system of transformation, and the system of a continuous improvement. Let me just explain you. System of it delivery is more to do with your projects and the products, your normal scrum, kanban, your stand up call, sprint backlog, like product backlog refinement, sprint planning, my sprint demo, retrospective. If you talk about a program level cadence, product owner sync up, product manager sync up, ART sync up. If I talk about portfolio level cadence, epic and sub epic cleanup, all these things are a system of a delivery. System of transformation is executing my agile transformation roadmap. In this session I will be mentoring you on how to create something called a outcome based plan to do an agile transformation. Then we are dealing system of a continuous improvement. Okay, can you make a guess why the system of continuous improvement is called out as separately? Can you make some guess?
See, basically in Agile, we always feel that Agile is an empirical process, and we inspect and adapt. Uh, so as we go about and implement Agile transformation, we don't want to become complacent, and we want to go from one state to a better version of the team, and make them high performing in the coming days. So for that, the continuous improvement should always be embedded in the system. Yeah.
Yes, so coming back to the point, you have identified the improvement areas, but identification alone will give benefit, or implementing the identified action items is going to give the benefit.
Only the implementation will actually
Correct,
help.
right? Correct,
Yeah.
because implementing the identified improvement items is going to give the benefit. Then someone need to work on it, right? And people will not be willing to work on it unless and until ownership had been given to that piece of work, right? See, if you see, let us take a simple example. It's a very human psychological mindset. My team member don't want to work on some activity which is not converted as a user story for him, correct? Because he is spending effort on it and he needs to be accounted for the particular effort. This is the problem in many of the companies. They will identify retrospective action items, and they will not allocate separate time. They will compel the person to both manage project and also manage the improvement items, which will not work in the long run. If you want to sustain something, these practices will not work. So what we used to do, no, in the rally, let's say rally, we have created a epic itself, no, saying retrospective action items, continuous improvements slash 2000 to not 21. So this will be a epic itself. Under this epic we have created the features. Okay, some features on the infrastructure, some features on the training needs. So what I'm trying to say is, like you have a epic sub epic feature for a system of a delivery. Now you start thinking having epic sub epic and features both for system of transformation and for a system of a continuous improvement. My system of transformation is something that coaches will be doing it, conducting design thinking workshop, conducting a waste identification workshop. So I used to create the user stories like this, and I will be assigning it to the coaches. So my coaches will be working on it. Okay, similarly in the system of continuous improvement, retrospective action items will be there and it will be assigned to change agents. Those guys will be picking it. So in the class I will explain you these things. Okay. when we get into the class, we have something called Agile Working Group. So that group is a collection of change agents. So those group will be picking up my system of a continuous improvement. Basically at a initiative level, but when it comes to user story level, again the team member need to work on it. Of continuous improvement. Okay, fine. Let's go to the next topic in the interest of time. Difference between business agility and enterprise or organizational agility, how to achieve, sustain and scale up. Okay, any thoughts come to your mind in terms of differences between these two things? Do you like to share? What could be business agility and what could be enterprise agility?
So for business agility, like based on the market trends,
Correct.
the 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 particular organization, whichever business they are doing, they need to identify how they are performing currently and what they need to improve in terms of the technology and infrastructure, and the services that they are offering to the end user. And then so that is why business agility is very important. And then in order to do the to implement it, we need enterprise agility. So that is what I feel.
Okay, so yeah, fine. So let me put it in this manner, my own perspective. You can replace this business agility with a word called the strategic adaptability going forward, maybe. Okay, business agility is equal to strategic adaptability, typically at a portfolio layer. Whereas enterprise agility is, let's say for example, A plus B plus C. What is A? A is building team level predictable delivery engine. Means the team should be predictable in terms of a delivery. Building team level predictable delivery engine. The B is some kind of an objectivity or objective based prioritization technique. Where do I need to pump in the money? For example, is there a prioritization technique based on an objective mechanism so that I can take a decision which one to do first, right? Which one to do first and where to invest. I can tell maximum bets for the business value, something like this. Okay. Then C is what I defined as a business agility. So what it means now, I cannot have an enterprise agility without having a team level predictable delivery engine, probably portfolio or a program level prioritization technique in terms of funding, and the third is a business agility. Now, one point to keep in mind, this A and B is something internal to your organization, whereas business agility is internal to the portfolio, continuously studying the market rhythm. Right. So since this is a recording call on a social media platform, I'm not going to explain in depth because it's an introduction class. Here we will be discussing about red ocean strategy versus blue ocean strategy, which one to go when, and all those aspects. And here I will also cover you something called a lean portfolio metrics. Portfolio metrics. Fine. Now let's go to the next one. Next topic is something like I'll take it here. Role of intentional versus emergent design in formulating agile transformation strategy roadmap. Okay. Now, what thoughts come to your mind when you keep hearing these intentional versus emergent design? See, it is bit of a technical. Okay. So, what thoughts come to your mind? Any suggestions or to share? Hmm.
So, sir, imagine design, because in Agile we always we know that the requirements will be dynamic,
Hmm.
and that is why the architecture, the design always it will be emerging. And then intentional, I feel that it could be because of either the uh, customer or the development team feel that a particular feature technology will suit that particular requirement better, so they propose those changes in those features. So
Yeah, so what it means is, let's say I am actually in an agile engagement. Now, from an implementation point of view, certain things will be fixed at the beginning. Say for example, whether it is a synchronous communication or an asynchronous communication between two modules, that thing cannot be changed, because once you fix it based on the contextual business imperatives, it is fixed. But the way of implementing it, okay, how does the communication actually going to get implemented, either using any message queue or using any JMS, some kind of a Java messaging service call, or am I going to build a stub or a driver or a mockup, some kind of a way to simulate it. So I am like, as you were rightly mentioned, emergent design is something where you are not committing to upfront design. Based on the evolving dynamics and the requirements, I will do the commitment later. Now the question will come, if you keep it open, then when will you commit? I will commit it at a particular point called LRM, last responsible moment. It is not procrastination, okay? Procrastination is not this. It is called last responsible moment. Till this LRM, Agile says defer the commitment. Because if any changes comes, cost to change will be very high. So in the class, I will explain you with an example for an intentional architecture versus emergent design, taking one of the safe principles, assume variability and preserve options, so that how do you go from a set-based approach to a point-based solution? How do you go from a diverging space to a converging point? Okay. Now let's go to the next one. Because if I start explaining that in deep, no, that will itself become a class. So I don't want to go too deep into it. Okay, next we are going to see on beyond budgeting. So beyond budgeting, you might have heard this term at least, right? Somewhere, beyond budgeting.
No.
Okay. Beyond budgeting, all these things are a mean to do flexible contracts, right? Because in an agile driven engagement, the scope can't be fixed. See, many people tell fixed scope is a problem. Yes, fixed scope is a problem, but what's a more burning problem is marrying the scope to the cost. That is the actual problem. People are not bothered about scope is getting changed. People are bothered about I am getting paid for the, I actually committed to some other scope, but now my client is keep on varying the scope or increasing the scope in the name of an agile engagement. That is the problem. People saying fixed scope is a problem is only a symptom. The actual root cause of the problem is marrying the scope to the cost imperatives. So fixed scope coming with a fixed cost is the problem. If the client is willing to vary the cost, then nothing is a problem. So we need to see actually what is the problem. Is it scope is the problem or cost is the problem? So here in the beyond budgeting, we will be seeing some of the principles to do agile related budgeting models. Okay. So here we will be looking into some of the principles like governance, how to have governance and transparency. Governance and transparency. Number second, how to build accountable teams, and what are all the planning and controls we can have. Planning and controls we can have. Fourth thing is something like goals and rewards. Okay, something like this. Okay, I will explain you in the class. But all that I'm trying to say is beyond budgeting and all these are some of the models wherein you can do some flexible contracting model. Okay. So when it comes in the class, I will show you how traditionally we are doing budgeting versus an agile driven engagement. Now, next topic what I had is something like pre-sales activities, right? If you see the topic, you will know it anyway. Okay, here. How to drive pre-sales activities and solution architecting, proactive selling, and something like this. So what? Okay, so what do you feel is so important, or what is the difficulty which this pre-sales people have in an agile engagement generally? Or had you written any RFP and all? Had you contributed to write any RFP, or how is that?
No, I have not contributed, but yes, we have supported in terms of the solution designing, and then giving the impact assessment of that change. So in that sense, I have supported. Uh,
Okay, so in the class I will explain you in a detail, but now just to introduce you to the concept, I'm just typing it here. Pre-sales activities, Marsh Marshmallow Challenge, and here we will be looking into how to create an elevator pitch for the sales. Just get some space here. How to create elevator pitch for the sale, and you will be building something called a lean proposal. So using this lean proposal, and then you will do a product discovery phase, and once you get clarity, then you will go to the stage of a final proposal. So why am I doing this product discovery journey? Because there is a high amount of cone of uncertainty. I cannot give a commitment unless and until I have certain things which is very clear. So only when I do a progressive elaboration, cone of uncertainty will be minimized. But till then, I cannot tell to my prospect or client, I cannot submit a proposal. So you need to submit a lean proposal and then do a product discovery phase, and factoring the ingredients of the outcomes of this product discovery phase, then you will submit the final proposal. So in the class I will teach you when these topics I am taking one by one. At the time I will deep dive into it. But at least now you need to know no what are all the things we are going to cover. So I am just explaining you the high level flow. Okay, let us go to the topic. Okay, so these are all these are all some of the topics for which I have some templates also, converting T&M engagement into managed services, and what are all the factors we need to do. Something very important I will tell you now. Okay, balancing power and influence in the VUCA world. Okay, all these things are okay, pretty much okay. Now come to point number 17. Why Agile is failing in a large organization? I will tell you some of the reasons. Okay, not now in the actual class, when I take the class. In a large organization, some of the reasons could be, if you want to make any change, you cannot just like that make a change, right? And there are a lot of intricate aspects in terms of the interconnections between different departments and all, and it will become very difficult to identify a value stream itself, because a typical value stream is going to cut across multiple departments, and in a large organization, to actually do your value stream identification itself, if I do a value stream mapping and a value stream identification workshop, that itself is going to become a challenge. For one reason, typically in a large organization, much of the decisions are centralized, and agility will not flow in a very good manner in a centralized ecosystem. You need an element of a decentralized decision making for me to have that nimbleness. So in the class I will explain you in detail, giving you some examples and all. Okay, now apart from the reasons what I told you now, do you have any other reason to say that agile generally fails in a large organization? Are there any thoughts you like to share?
Mainly, yeah,
Mm.
I agree with you regarding the decentralization of decision making. And then,
Mm.
first of all, whenever we have agile transformation, I feel that it is the leadership who should undergo the education phase first, because
Mm.
once they are perfectly um comfortable, and they are motivated for this transformation, then only the whole team will be able to make the mindset as well as the
Mm.
practices change in them. So they need the leaders to mirror the change first.
Correct. Yeah. So when I take the class, then I will deep dive into what are all the failure patterns. See, because see, even from an interview point of view, many people will come prepared with the case studies on a success of a agile transformation. If you suddenly ask the candidate, hey, can you tell me one or two cases where agile failed? Many of the candidates will not be able to explain it. Only candidates who have real-time experience will answer that particular question. Candidates who have prepared well but not having real-time experience will generally take a lot of time to think. because it is an unexpected question. Everyone will study only success cases, but generally when I take interview, one of the general question what I ask is, okay, can you tell me some failure patterns of agile? Okay, so I'm just saying you why this failure patterns of agile is very important is that these are all the places where things can tend to go wrong. So it is always good to know if I tread on this road, chances are that to slip is more. Okay, so we can be very cautious in terms of creating our agile transformation strategy. Okay, from that point of view. Okay, in 18, we will be talking about organizational cultural transformation. I will take one session particularly on cultural transformation. How is that I have done a cultural transformation end to end. What are all the models I have used, and based on the models, then out and also how to measure culture. See, measuring culture becomes a challenge because it is not a Boolean number like 0 or 1. I need to create some ranges. Okay, and I need to create some clearly defined categories. And one more thing, culture is a very sensitive, no sensitive topic too. So we need to cautiously handle it. So in this session, I will teach you some cultural transformation models, how I have done a cultural transformation, all those things, and also how you can quantify it. Okay. Then we'll talk about OKR, objective and key result areas, followed by the KPIs. Okay. So can you see some relevance? Why are we talking about OKR here? Like at an agile leadership level? Can you
Because
tell me the connecting thread?
we have to create a outcome based plan, and that is why the
Correct.
goal setting and OKR are important.
Correct. See, all these things I'm talking at an effectiveness layer. I'm not talking about an efficiency layer. Efficiency layer will be anyway taken care by the program level guys and the team level people. Portfolio layer is more on effectiveness. Am I doing the right thing? Okay, which is going to generate revenue, which is going to put my company in the limelight in a positive note, and which is going to improve my customer satisfaction score, my employee engagement score, which is going to improve the brand image of the company, everything. So unless and until I have clarity on my objectives and what are all the key result areas and how are they getting measured using KPIs, like no, I cannot do a business transformation. Maybe you can do an agile transformation. Okay, fine. The next point is how to create an executive guide to do a large scale transformation and sustain an adaptive enterprise. See, in this, what I will be doing is I will not download any executive guide from the internet and then explain you. I will teach you what are all the building blocks to create an executive guide so as to do a large scale agile transformation. Once we are done with our class, then we will download some material, and then we will compare where are we and what does the material says, and then we will plug the gap. So my request to you is, at least during the mentorship program, try to minimize using a Google. The moment you use Google more, we are killing our originality to think, because it is giving you knowledge only, right? Okay, from that perspective. Okay, so let's keep moving. So here I will talk of, yeah, sorry. Okay, can I continue?
Yes, I was saying okay. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. So here we will also talk about the SAFe 5, because typically in SAFe 5 we are talking about business agility as an operating model, right? So I will touch upon some aspects pertaining to that. This topic is very important topic. How to analyze balance sheet, cash flow analysis statement, and income statement of your portfolio. Based on that, how will you change it? So this itself will take a couple of classes. In one class I can explain you, then maybe I'll give you some small assignments wherein you can do it and then come back to me. Okay, then we'll keep going. Okay, now how to bring in agile to organizations which are not built for agility. For that I already prepared good amount of material and I kept it ready. Most of the materials are coming from the PMI Agile forum, that I will socialize it to you. So these topics somewhat interrelated. Okay, some topics from here will also come here, but I still called it as a different topic. When we will do it, we will see, okay, how to paraphrase it. Okay. Okay, then one more thing, had you heard about somewhere actually scaling models try to descale your organization? Had you had somewhere did you read something like this? I'm trying to use a scaling model, though it is a scaling model. The intent of the scaling model is to bring a lesser hierarchy, like it should be a flat hierarchy. Had you heard some terms like this somewhere?
Yes, so I
Hmm.
so like we there is a model called holacracy.
Hmm.
So there they have created they have decentralized the decision making.
Hmm.
So it really helps in having this flat hierarchical structure and people get empowered to take their decisions.
Hmm, correct. So, in terms of scaling, it is more on how am I going to orchestrate the different layers or levels existing in the organization. But in the name of scalable model, I should not further complicate the things. If I scale it up in such a manner that the model itself going to curtail the flow of agility, then it is not a fit for a candidate. It's not fit for a purpose. So we will see in this session, in this class, okay, what are all the different scalable patterns, okay, using which we can build our own customized model, right? See, even the diagram what I showed you, know here, this is my own customized diagram only, right? Not this one, right? So here I have never mentioned anything from Kanban, but yes, so Kanban are safe. But then yes, the concept I have taken from safe. But here I'm changing it based on my own ecosystem. And I'm not taking anything from the spanning palette of safe. This is my own spanning palette. Continuous improvement, strategic refactoring, which I explained you in the PPT, and then operations review. Now, people ask me, why do you have metrics and KPIs different? Metrics is epic level throughput, epic level cycle time, epic level lead time. KPIs could be sometimes even portfolio level KPIs like customer acquisition cost. Okay, percentage of operating profit margin, or it could be at a team level. If I'm taking an application, it could be application KPIs, 99 percentage availability, and if there is a downtime, then probably the SLA breach is accepted only till this much hours, something like that. Okay, application level KPIs is this. Metrics is anyway based on your framework, you can tell. That's why we are having two things. One is metric, second thing is the KPI. Okay, now let's keep moving. In the interest of time, I think I missed it out here. Okay, I'll come back here. Okay, this thing we will see, and we will also and we will discuss about some of the coaching tools, because this is important. No, as an agile coach, you need to know what are all the different coaching tools, so that we can select the right coaching tool. And I have one portal wherein I will try to simulate you the kind of a situation which really happens in a boardroom, right? So I have taken a licensed version of some application which I will tell later. So probably we will try to simulate some of the activities there, and then you will get a better feel. Okay. So this is more from a see here. I'm actually taking the agile transformation benefits and then trying to map it back to the business concepts. Okay. Then this class I will teach you on common mistakes. Okay, any common mistakes which you feel in terms of a safe implementation? Can you suggest any common mistakes which generally people make?
So basically, in the PI planning, like I have seen that we have a confidence vote.
Hmm.
But normally, if you have projects with very tight timelines,
Hmm.
the team who is giving the confidence vote, they feel a little bit powerless because
Okay.
the timelines cannot be changed. And so whatever confidence they are showing, it's not actually on the basis of the truth.
Oh, okay, okay. Good point it is. Okay, fine, fine. Uh-huh. Okay. Maybe that point can also be added in my notes. I was thinking from other angles, like some of the mistakes what will happen is that in the name of contextualization and customization, people try to dilute the principles of a safe. For example, some of the clients will tell, hey, I will do only till program level safe. I will not do portfolio level safe. Then actually you are not doing safe. means from the purest definition of a safe. Okay, I understand the limitations of the ecosystem, all those things, because for example, when I was doing a safe scaled agile framework implementation, one of my client and my business leaders told that to contextualize the safe implementation maturity assessment sheet. But I told them, if I contextualize the assessment sheet at the beginning itself, then against what I will compare it? I should not contextualize the sheet at the beginning of the game. Yes, contextualization, customization matters, but the question is when, not at the beginning. Because if you contextualize your assessment sheet at the beginning, against what will you compare? It is like keep on changing the expected result or actual result of a column. When you do your testing, right, what is the expected result? That should be fixed. Only then the actual result of the test can be compared against the expected result. If I keep on changing the expected result, then against what will you compare? So do not contextualize a framework, do not contextualize your assessment sheet at the beginning. Do an assessment, tell them these are all the gaps. Then comes the stage of a contextualization. So in the name of contextualization, generally industry uh, literally tries to dilute the principles. So here I will teach you on what are all the common anti-patterns and how to handle it. Last topic will be top 10 metrics for an agile organization. I already have the metrics. I will share it to you. I will explain it to you, and maybe one or two topics, if you feel as important, I will actually add it over here. So any questions now on a quick walkthrough of the lesson plan, or how do you feel now?
Yes, I feel I feel confident because all these are very relevant topics for enterprise agile coach
Okay, so
competencies.
yeah, so what we'll do, if you are okay, I will stop the recording here and then we will continue. Okay, fine, 1 minute.
Sure.